And with that, I would like to welcome everyone to IAP2 Intermountain's Learning Lunch today. I am very excited about this topic and these speakers. We are joined here today by Melody Malure and Danny Hess with Bozeman, the city of Bozeman, Montana. Very excited that with no dedicated engagement staff, this small core team of two and limited budget has built an engagement framework and implementation in less than a year. So I'm really excited to see what they've done to leverage our IAP2 principles, connecting with peer communities, and just getting people excited about engagement in Bozeman, in Montana, and for the Intermountain region. I'm super excited. I think y'all will be too, because this is a very interactive session, so get ready to participate. For those who might be interested in other IAP2 Intermountain events and other great things our chapter does, please visit our website at iap2intermountain.com. And on behalf of David Jones, our chapter president, myself, Liz Bueller, we also have Cassie Hemphill from our Montana representative. Welcome to this webinar. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Melody and Danny.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So I will get us started here. We have pretty much a jam-packed hour, so we won't burn too much time with introductions. Elizabeth did a nice job teeing it up. Just a little bit of information about me and my role. I am the Communications and Engagement Manager at the city. And in this 30 seconds, I'm giving you a little bit more of a forewarning that yes, like Elizabeth said, this will be an interactive session. You'll get to try out some, maybe a technique or two that you've used before, or maybe one that you've never used. So while you don't have to have your camera on while Danny and I are doing some of our presenting pieces while we share slides, be ready, because we will have some moments where we call on you to turn your camera on and hopefully engage with the people that are on the call today. If for some reason you're in a location or an area where you feel like you won't be able to come off camera, or maybe not able to come off mute, if you wouldn't mind just sending a direct chat to Elizabeth, she's the IAP2 Intermountain person, just to let her know, so that if we send you into a breakout room and you're not able to talk to someone, we're putting you into a group that still allows for you to participate. And then I'll turn it over to Danny. And I'm going to start sharing our slides too here in a second.
Thanks, Melody. Hey, everyone. My name is Danny Hess. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Community Engagement Coordinator here in the city of Bozeman. And while Melody brings up the slides here, I just wanted to ask folks if they're able to access the chat and they've got the free hands to do it. Go ahead and just enter your name and your agency or jurisdiction in the chat box, just so we get a feel for who's in the room. All right. So like we said, Melody Malure and Danny Hess with the city of Bozeman. And we're going to just start us off here by telling a little bit of background, our journey in the engagement space. So the city's first strategic plan was adopted by commission in 2018. And that's really when both communications and community engagement were really elevated as priorities for the city.
We are IAP2 members. I assume many of you are, or at least familiar with IAP2. So just so you know, we're going to talk about the framework that we developed very briefly. The presentation part of our discussion here will probably only be in total like 20 to 25 minutes. So we're not going to go into some of the basic principles of what IAP2 teaches. However, we can tell you right now that as we talk about the framework, as we talk about some of the tools we're using, Danny will drop links to those documents or websites in the chat so you can look and read at a later time, but we are using the main principle. So we're not going to talk about the spectrum here. We're not going to necessarily get into the decision-making process, but that is already woven in to what we do here at the city of Bozeman. So IAP2 members, we actually created Engage Bozeman, our engagement strategy in-house. Like Elizabeth mentioned, it was really just Danny and I sharing a Google Doc and writing out all of the information we were learning through foundations and tailoring it to the city of Bozeman. And then one thing that we were really excited about is we were able to leverage some existing dollars to train in 13 of our existing city of Bozeman staff in IAP2 foundations. So we have a great crew of folks right now who can support us and support other folks in departments as we make Engage Bozeman a reality.
So on the tail end of developing and finalizing that Engage Bozeman initiative that was adopted by City Commission in 2020, we started laying the groundwork for bringing some more tools on board. And that includes an online platform that we're calling Engage Bozeman. That's through the Bang the Table Engage HQ platform. So we're beginning to use that in engagement projects now with the city. And at the same time, we're really ramping up our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts and embarking on the process of developing a community-wide plan for DEI. So I'll turn it back over to Melody now, and she'll dig in a little bit more to the process of developing that Engage Bozeman framework.
So Danny dropped the document into the chat here. So be sure to look through it after our presentation today, and feel free to reach out to us if you have questions. But I'm going to talk about one of the things that was really inspiring for us as we were writing this strategy and as we were figuring out how we were going to see it implemented at the city. And that was to really be clear and defined about the guiding principles we were using for our engagement practice. And we actually learned this from one of our colleagues that we met through network like this here today from Fort Collins. When we were trying to figure out what to include here, we heard loud and clear from them that conversations around equity and the intersection of engagement and equity were becoming more and more top of mind. And so we realized that we really wanted to start first and foremost with equity and inclusivity as a guiding principle for us. So you can see that we have 3 key sets of guiding principles: equity and inclusivity, transparency and trust, and innovation and adaptation. And so as we work with staff to identify tools and techniques, or figure out what process might work best or what level of engagement might be appropriate for a project, we are always trying to root ourselves in these guiding principles and make sure that whatever we're doing in this space is being true to those areas. One of the fun things that we did, and you'll see throughout the Engage Bozeman document, is that we actually engaged on our engagement strategy and talked to many key partners across the community. Some who had actually a lot of experience participating with the city on different decisions. And then purposefully, we reached out to some groups who maybe hadn't had an opportunity to have their voice heard at the table. And we actually took that learning that we gathered from that and used it to actually amplify some of the points that we wanted to make note of in Engage Bozeman. So Danny's just created an awesome slide here that highlights a couple of things that we found very helpful. So I'll just speak to those out loud. So for us here today, they're really nice. Being humble learners, to acknowledge limitations builds trust. Be transparent about learning processes. Leaders need to model the messiness of not knowing. And then because we're going to do some interacting today, it's always nice to remind ourselves to take risks. So Danny and I are taking a risk here. We're going to do a few things that we've never done before or haven't done in this space. Growing is uncomfortable. You have to be willing to stop the way you're doing things and start in another direction. So we certainly had some challenges as we talked to people. We heard some places where we hadn't always been successful in engagement, but out of that came a lot of opportunities to do better and learn from those we talked to. Hey, Danny.
So another part of the engagement framework of that document that you'll find in the chat that I wanted to highlight here is this question of when we do engagement. And this came up a lot as we were sort of introducing this new engagement framework to staff, piloting some initial projects using our new engagement framework, and hearing from the community of like, okay, So now you have this new engagement, this new engagement framework, this new way of doing engagement. How do you decide which projects go through this full process, this new process? So these are three key questions that we really reflect on as we're planning for engagement for a given city project. The first is really grounding down into how the public can play a role in the decision-making process. Always coming back to that first question of what's the decision to be made and how will public input really improve the outcome or the final decision that's made? And then what's the impact on the public? What are the intended outcomes? What are the unintended consequences of a given decision? And really understanding how the impact of a given decision affects different groups in the community differently. And then the last question here, which is also really important, is understanding what the timeline is that we're working with for a given project, what the budget is, and what resources look like. What is staff capacity to implement a truly high quality and authentic engagement process? So some of the tools that we use and that we're continuing to develop and make adjustments to as we're rolling out this framework are things like the internal and external expectations matrix that was a part of the IAP2 Foundations and Planning course. So really making sure that we're using the tools that we have access to and that we've been trained on from IAP2 principles. And then again, coming back to clarity among all of the people who are playing a role in a given city project or a given engagement effort. Staff, directors, administration, decision makers, and the public all need to be really clear on the decisions to be made, the decisions that have already been made, and how public input will play into that.
Yeah. So how do we do community engagement when we actually go to do the doing? What we found was a challenge in different periods of time where we had tried to do engagement, maybe before we had fully defined it and had some structure, was that we didn't do a good job of what we call closing the loop. And actually Tanya, who is on the call right now, is our former neighborhoods coordinator, and she's really the person that planted this seed here at the city of Bozeman. And I know that I had conversations with her for several years about how do we close this loop? How do we do a better job? And so as a part of Engage Bozeman, we got really clear about what we see as the steps for us. And obviously this is adapted from conversations you have in IAP2 for what it looks like to really see a circle or a cycle of planning, implementation, and evaluation. So what we found was, what we were really good at was we were really good at creating a plan, coming up with a way to do it. In fact, we were pretty decent at even engaging with Bozeman, bringing people to the table and having those conversations and getting people to participate. What we started to get less good at was that when decision makers made decisions, we didn't always inform the public on how their input influenced that decision. We didn't always inform them about what decision was actually made. And then by that time, because many of us are busy people, we can feel overwhelmed. We can feel like, oh my God, we did the engagement part. That was exhausting. I'm not ready for anything more. We would usually not be able to get into the reflection and evaluation section where we looked at how effective our engagement process really was. We weren't doing post-engagement surveys. We weren't finding out what worked or didn't work for people. And then as a result, we weren't planning for future projects. So our goal is to create this continuous feedback and improvement of the process, because ultimately what we believe is it gets at that second set of guiding principles for us, which is trust and transparency. Nothing develops trust in the process more than being able to bring people in, tell them how their input influenced the decision, ask them how we could do better, and then do better the next time. Okay, so that was sort of like the dry stuff. I'm going to turn it over to Danny and stop sharing my screen here.
Okay, everyone. So now's the part where I'm going to ask you to turn your cameras on if you're able, and join us in a simple game of Never Have I Ever. And if you haven't ever played Never Have I Ever, don't worry, it's really simple. It'll just be a way for us to sort of figure out who's in the room, who's done what, who's who, So if you're ready, go ahead and hold up 5 fingers. Show us your hand, okay? And I'm gonna just run through a series of questions, and the last person with the finger standing, is the person who has never. So, number 1, never have I ever cut my own hair. Okay, we're seeing some fingers dropping.
I'm seeing COVID happening here.
Yeah, pre-COVID, post-COVID, haven't ever cut my own hair. Used a smiley face in an email. Totally guilty. Said something embarrassing in a meeting while accidentally unmuted. Okay. Given public comment at a city meeting. Okay. Been fluent in a language other than my first. Fluent definitions of fluency. We don't have hard and fast rules around that one.
I'm watching because in the game of never have I ever, I feel like when you go out, you have to clap. And so I'm seeing that there's like a couple people with one finger left. So I'm watching to see who the first one is.
I see you, Tanya. Okay, taken an IAP2 training. Hey, how about led or facilitated an IAP2 training? Okay.
We're
How
supposed
about,
to clap?
What's that? Oh yeah, clap, Wendy, bye. How about presented at an IAP2 conference? Okay, they're dropping like flies over here. And what about participating in a diversity, equity, and inclusion training? Who in the room has led or facilitated a diversity, equity, and inclusion training? Okay. And the last one, have a CP3 certification from IAP2. Liz is in somewhere in the middle there in the process. Awesome. Okay, so we still have some people standing. Way to go, everyone. Well, thanks for joining us for that exercise. It's just getting us warmed up for some deeper conversations coming up here about the work that you all are doing in your jurisdictions. Okay. So after that fun light exercise, I wanted to bring us into a conversation about some of the challenges and opportunities that we touched on a little bit in our sort of run through of the Engage Bozeman framework, but I really wanted to make sure we highlighted to queue up conversations about challenges and opportunities in your own work. So like I mentioned, improving planning tools is something that we're really thinking about and grappling with as we get better and do more of this work in city projects. So we're adjusting the planning tools that we have, like the community engagement planning template that Melody and I took advantage of after our IAP2 training. We're really trying to find the line with these tools, like the planning template, between helpful and overwhelming. So we're making some adjustments to that. And then second, learning new techniques. So like we said earlier, taking risks is uncomfortable. It continues to be something that we have to remind ourselves is worth it. Nobody wants bottomless focus groups and surveys forever and ever. We've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and trying new things. And then the third thing here, weaving in equity. How do we do that in a way that doesn't overburden already burdened community groups or populations within our cities? So how do we avoid just going out to those same partners over and over to ask them to provide input or to help distribute a survey in a way that doesn't acknowledge their contribution either with compensation or with some kind of mutual benefit? And that comes with something that's more than transactional. It's really about that capital W work of developing relationships and building trust. And then setting expectations internally, like I mentioned before, really coming back to the point that engagement isn't a silver bullet or a thing that can just overlook the fact that a given decision or a given project is contentious. Doing engagement for a contentious decision isn't just going to make all the controversy go away. And we need to really recognize that. And if we are doing engagement just to check a box or just to overlook the contention in a given project, stop, pause, reflect, and redirect or pivot. And then building relationships externally. It's really about moving the intention in engagement from transactional to relational. And we'd love to dig into that more with you all in small group conversations later in our time together. Because the input that we get really reflects the quality of the relationships that we have with folks that we're getting input from. So that's sort of a list of some of the things that we're really considering as we're improving our engagement efforts here at the City of Bozeman. And then I'll turn it back over to Melody to cue us up.
Okay, so we are going to do another interactive activity for you all. So now would be the time, if you haven't told Wendy yet, like, hey, I really am not going to be able to come off mute. You need to let her know, because she is busy putting us all into some breakout rooms. So you are going to do what we call a pair share or a speed date round with maybe one or two other people. And I'll have Danny drop this in the chat, but here's what you're going to do. So for about 10 minutes or so, and I think that we do have about 10 minutes, Elizabeth, we are going to have you summarize your organization's engagement story to your partner or your partners, and then talk about what's one thing your organization is doing in the engagement space that you are really proud of. And then I want you to also talk about the biggest engagement challenge you face at your organization or in your community. So maybe Danny's comments about what we're experiencing right now trigger some thoughts for you about how you can take advantage of opportunities, or maybe tackle a challenge differently in your organization. So we're going to go into these pair shares for about 10 minutes or so. We'll call you back, and then we'll have about 5 minutes for you to share out, and Danny will facilitate that share out section. So we are going to drop that information in the chat so that you'll be able to have it, and you'll have about 10 minutes. Are we ready with the rooms, Elizabeth? Looks like she is working away at it.
Apologies, I am working on it, getting some folks. So just trying to sign folks who are able to participate. So one second, everyone.
Great. And I know that Danny dropped the Engage Bozeman document in the chat at the very beginning of our conversation. So Danny, maybe you want to just copy and paste that back in there for anyone who didn't have a chance to grab it. That is something we're really proud of, and it definitely influences how we talk about engagement day to day. And you might have caught a theme that we referenced in our first part of our conversation. So I'll just preview for you. We are going to talk about the intersection of equity and engagement for the second half of our conversation here today. So if you're wondering what's coming after our little breakout rooms, that will be what you can expect.
All right, last group is just being created, and then I will check in with everyone. If I accidentally assigned you to, I apologize. So, all right. All right, let's see. I'm sorry, Brandon. Oh, Brandon went. Okay. Hopefully we have everyone in the correct rooms.
Great.
Awesome. Thanks, Liz.
Yeah, sorry about that. We got some last minute, so I was trying to manually add people. Apologies.
No problem. So no I'm wondering, worries. I know that there's a couple folks who either can't come off mute, hi Tracy, or maybe needed to just be in this room. So I kind of feel like I don't want to just leave you hanging there. If you are interested in coming off mute and you want to talk, you're welcome to come off mute so we know you're able to. Otherwise, maybe Elizabeth, Danny, and I will have a nice discussion here and you can listen in, or you can send an email while you wait for everyone to come back. Okay.
Or eat a sandwich.
Or eat a sandwich. Okay, Elizabeth, are you willing to pair share with us?
Yes, except if it's all right, if you two pair share, because I'm going to go and check in on some people, make
Perfect.
sure that they have, that they're not all by themselves. So I'm going to move them around.
Mhm.
Apologies.
Cool.
No problem.
Yeah, and you can send them back out to this main room if they're left stranded. We could just talk with them here.
Okay, Danny,
Mhm.
you have been with the city of Bozeman for a year and a half now.
Mhm.
And when you started, we were just starting this work. So
Yep.
if you were to, in 30 seconds, tell someone about our story of engagement, tell the story. Tell me the 30-second story.
Tell the 30-second story. Okay, the 30-second story. It started with top-down support. And that I think came through this like community engagement being a strategic plan priority named by the city commission. So that top-down support sort of gave staff the oomph to pick up and run with this, along with a lot of the groundwork that happened below that elected level with Tanya, who was in my position before me. So the combination of staff support and staff energy and motivation to do this stuff and the strategic plan prioritization, I think that really helped us launch into this effort, because we were able to launch right into an association that supports staff like us doing this effort. So the fact that IAP2 existed and had this really comprehensive training for us to take, like that combined with the top-down support and the staff motivation really allowed us to get a lot done in a little amount of time.
How much longer do you want to give folks in the breakout rooms? I had a question.
Sure. I think I'm just looking at our time here. I think I could give them probably, I could give them another 4 to 5 minutes. 3 to 4 minutes. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So Danny, I think I don't know the answer to this question. At the city of Bozeman, what is something we're doing right now that you are really proud of in engagement?
In engagement. I mean, I think I'm proud of our ability to sort of stick to our guns because of the framework that we've set up. And so I'm proud that we have staff coming to us saying, hey, we have this project happening. I think we should do engagement. Can we have a conversation about it? Like, I'm proud of the fact that it's on people's radar. And then in those conversations, we can say, let's drill down into this question about the decision to be made, public's role, blah, 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 and like have a candid conversation about that. So the fact that we're sticking to our guns is something I'm proud of. It's small, but it's something.
Okay. And
What are you
then
proud of?
what am I proud of? I will say, for anyone listening right now who works in a government organization or an organization that has a lot of history to it and tends to be a slow moving place, and for many good reasons, I'm really proud of the time frame that we got this work accomplished in. I know that maybe some will roll their eyes in other parts of the world that it took us about a year to get from creation to implementation. But for the city of Bozeman, that is sort of like a gold standard. I mean, and not only were we just like getting something off the ground, we were, as Danny said at the very beginning of when we were doing this, we were creating culture change. Like, we had a lot of what's imposter syndrome, because you know, here we're not directors. We were just sort of top-down support and hoping that people would believe in the effort and believe in this decision to change our culture. But I think that we did it with very little people and really almost no budget, and got it off the ground. And like you said, now it's happening and we're sticking to our guns and really making sure that it's not just a conversation that was had one time and then floated away and it became this initiative that we didn't talk about anymore. It is being woven into what we do.
Are you all good with one more minute?
That sounds good.
Perfect. Okay, in a minute, Melody, biggest challenge.
In a minute, the biggest challenge. Oh, I feel so jaded these days. I feel like the biggest challenge we face in our community and organization is finding a way to reframe things positively. I think that people are feeling the pressure and the angst of, in our area, change, but in our worlds, change too. And like, I let that get to me. And I think that we sometimes have to play the positive, happy, bubbly person in an internal meeting. We sometimes have to play that in an external meeting. And so trying to find a way to reframe in even just a neutral or positive stance is so valuable for trying to improve like the work that we do as well.
Yeah, love that. There's nothing like the power of a positive reframe.
That is such a great message. And I think a lot of people would agree with it. They might not know how to articulate it, but they agree with it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's okay, I am going to close all the rooms.
Bring them back, bring them back.
Bring them back, bring them out. I heard that, Melody. I heard that's where you're coming from.
I
They're
can't.
being closed. People are coming in.
Great.
No breakout participant
Hello?
left behind. Hopefully.
Cassie's group did good. Everyone else is holding on by their fingertips into their breakout rooms. They're really having a great discussion.
Waiting
Well,
for the timer.
We wound up only having Brandon and me in our group, and so we were being really conscientious with our time.
Yeah, there was a person in there who didn't send me a message, but I noticed they didn't join. So I'm sure knowing you, Cassie, I bet there was good conversation. Brandon, I don't know, but I'm guessing you alone, I know, would have a great combo.
Oh, you're very kind.
This is great conversation.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. So let's just take a couple minutes here to do a really quick share out. Is there someone who wants to share something that really is sticking with them and that they think is going to continue to stick with them after they leave this session? Just go ahead and come off mute or wave your hand around and share something that you thought was a really good nugget.
I'll chime in real quick. So I was in the chat room with Emmy and Sarah, and from Missoula County, and I'm very compelled by this idea of a podcast. That's a really brilliant idea, and it's a way of becoming more interactive with communities that you're touching, and a way of getting the messaging out there. And it's not as burdensome as putting together let's say a video of what might be going on, and maybe a great technique that Salt Lake City might be able to undertake as part of our engagement. We do have a team of very talented videologists, I'll call them, but having a podcast that folks can be invited to and interact, especially folks from the community, not just from the city. So great stuff. Thank you, Emmy and Sarah.
Yeah, I love hearing about that. That sounds like a really cool new tool that can be used to literally like hand the mic to someone else and to elevate voices. That's awesome. Let's take one more good nugget and then we'll move on to the next part of our presentation.
Well, I'll jump in. Really what we were talking about is I was in a room with Brandon and one other person who unfortunately wasn't able to come off mute and join us. But we were talking about the fact that sometimes you have to celebrate those small wins, that sometimes agencies are very resistant, or people in agencies are resistant to the idea of public engagement. And so we should, instead of thinking about what we're not accomplishing, think about what we're accomplishing now that we couldn't previously.
I love that. Thanks for sharing, Cassie. In our homeroom, Melody pointed out the power of a positive reframe, especially in a time when there's sort of a lot to be down about. So yeah, that positive reframe and celebrating the small wins is super important. Thanks everyone for chiming into those conversations. So the next few minutes here, I'm just going to spend some time running us through our equity work here at the city. Melody, do you want to take this first slide since?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Danny and I have hinted at it through our conversation, but equity is a part of our guiding principles for engagement. We recognize that conversations around equity and the intersection with engagement are happening more and more. So we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing in this space, and then we're going to have a group conversation that touches on some components of how this really touches our lives as engagement public participation practitioners. So in 2020, the city created the Inclusive City Report. It was an internal review that identified 24 action items of things that the city could do to try to improve how we show up as an organization to be a more inclusive and welcoming community. And our purpose is really this: to create a community where every resident, visitor, and City of Bozeman employee feels welcomed, valued, and can thrive, no matter their race, identity, or life circumstance.
So I'm going to touch on just a few of the highlights of those 24 action items that we're undertaking as a part of that Inclusive City initiative. And the first one here that really is laying the groundwork for our future work and our occurring work now in the diversity, equity, inclusion space is this data collection effort. So we went out and we talked with community members. We spoke with representatives from organizations that provide services to vulnerable populations. And we asked what data they're collecting, what data they don't have, and what really is meaningful to track in our community as we're looking to close the gaps and make Bozeman a place where everyone can thrive. And so the indicators here just are several examples from the school district that show some gaps in graduation rates among different students in Bozeman. So we see that students who experience homelessness, students who are English learners, and students with disabilities all graduate at much lower rates than those who don't. So in addition to the data, this project, the data collection and the engagement that we did through this project helped us open up or take steps in opening up procurement and vendor selection processes. We had a committee of external community partners help us evaluate and select a consultant for this work. We're entering into some data sharing agreements with partner organizations, which hasn't ever been a formalized process that the city has engaged in. And the city is really sort of acting as a convener in building relationships with service providing organizations in the community, recognizing the work that they're already doing and elevating and supporting that work. So the next slide here is a follow-up to that data collection and engagement effort. We wanted to provide an opportunity to share out those equity indicators and bring all of the folks who contributed to that process together, as well as other new partners and community members, to both learn about the data and to hear some stories from community members who wanted to share their lived experience here in Bozeman. So we had over 120 participants in this virtual space. It was the first event where the city provided Spanish language access and closed captioning and other accommodations for folks attending that virtual meeting. So that was a cool win that we were able to pull together with a new partner providing remote simultaneous interpretation in Spanish. And then we had 3 local storytellers who could speak to their unique lived experiences here in Bozeman and really get us to shift our idea of what sort of the Bozeman narrative is. And then at the end of that event, we had 30 organizations take an equity commitment, which is as simple as a Google form that asks people to reflect on what they can do, what actions they can take to close some of the gaps that we learned about in the data. So those partners are being invited to participate in the creation of a community-wide diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. So that process is kicking off now. We're talking to a bunch of peer communities. We're building connections with peer communities who have traveled this road or started this journey already to learn about how they set up their teams, how they hired out for help in this diversity, equity, inclusion planning world, and how they did engagement to really create a roadmap and a plan to close the gaps. So that's where we're at now. And Melody is going to lead us through setting up some conversations that we can talk about some of these intersections in equity and engagement in our own communities.
Yes. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, though you have a little preview here of what we're going to do. We are going to do what we learned as a Socratic circle. So I am going to have you all turn your cameras on if you're able to do so. So I have a sense of everyone who's out there who's able to participate. So for show of hands, has anyone ever done a Socratic circle, facilitated a Socratic circle? I've heard it's also maybe called a Samoan circle. If you've never done it before, this is a really fun way for us to practice speaking in a group, and also a fun way for us to participate and engage in conversations that we maybe aren't the ones speaking in. So this is going to require some focus from you guys all as I talk us through it, and then we're going to get into it. So there are 3 questions that Danny's going to throw in the chat as we get started, but I'm going to divide you up into 3 groups right now. So I'm going to ask you to listen for your name and listen to what group you are in. So I'm going to start with group 1. Okay, listen for your name. Group 1, you are Cassie, Tanya, Wendy, Takami, and Emmy. That's group 1. Okay, group 2, you are Teresa, David, Sarah, Courtney, and Katie. That's group 2. Group 3, my last group. Group 3, you are Jordan, Patrick, Carla, and I would love for Elizabeth to participate if she wants. So Elizabeth, you are group 3. And anyone who I might have missed because your camera is off, but you still feel like you want to participate, you can join in at group 3. Okay, so I have 3 groups. Does anyone not know what group they are in? Great. If you miss your group, you can join a different group. Here's how this is going to work. Group 1 is going to start our conversation with their cameras on. Everyone else is going to turn their camera off. So if you are not in group 1, feel free to turn your camera off. If you would like to make it really, really cool, you can go into your video settings. So under video, click on the little up arrow and click on your video settings. Then scroll down to the bottom where you see a box that checks hide non-video participants. So video settings. Scroll down, check the box, hide non-video participants. That means you will only see the people on your screen who have their video on. So if you can't figure that out, that's totally fine. So here's what we're doing. Group 1, you are going to get to talk through the questions or the conversations that happen as a result of the things that Danny just dropped in the Dropbox for about 3 to 4 minutes. Danny and I are going to turn our cameras off. You're not going to see us anymore. And we are not going to talk. And you get to talk for 3 to 4 minutes. I will come back when you're done. Feel free to start with one of the questions here or to have your own conversation. And then I'm going to call group 2. Group 1, you're going to turn your cameras off. Group 2, cameras on. You can pick up conversation that group 1 had, or you can start with a different question that's in the box. and then we'll go to group 3. Okay, Danny and I are not going to help you have this conversation. We will let you sit in awkward silence. Your time starts now.
Hi, group 1. It looks like we have 3 questions that we can discuss right now. Should we go one by one? What is one way? Okay, what is one way you could address a barrier to engagement for an underrepresented group in your community?
I guess I can start for Missoula County. We just kind of started a conversation fairly recently. Sorry, my microphone's a little quiet. We just kind of started a conversation not too long ago about thinking about those disabilities as far as their access to parts of our website that maybe like are very small text or you know, and we're looking at a new website eventually here, but like that's kind of, you know, just thinking about like our appearance online, and then also thinking about another group that we often struggle to reach, I think, are those who are not necessarily super tech savvy, who maybe you know, are more elderly, or maybe just don't have access to internet or whatnot, like ways we can get information out in the community. So yeah, we've just been talking about like reaching out to more, doing more outreach to like either nonprofits in town, or like places of worship, or places that, you know, people gather that maybe don't, you know, they hear more word of mouth, or they see like a poster, or, you know. So those are, I guess, a couple things that we've been working on lately.
Yeah, that brought to mind for myself that you really can't understate the importance of just on like boots on the ground kind of relational outreach and finding connections into that community, and just being like a face. And I say that with in mind, like I work a lot in the Red Lodge community, and they have a pretty large Amish community there. And they're not really online, you know, you can't use some of those ways to reach them. And I know that there's folks like that even within Gallatin County. So finding those connections and meeting them where they are, like just finding where are the places that they go, and like how do they gather. You kind of have to do that extra on the like boots on the grounds kind of step with some of these folks.
Anybody else have some strategies for question number 1?
You, Tanya.
I guess mine is fairly similar to what Takami just said. I think really working on cultivating relationships with folks who can be ambassadors or liaisons. It takes some work to figure out who's not at the table. And so that's sort of an ongoing part of work. And being really intentional about that. And then to try to figure out who can represent or stay in contact with that group of people or sector or population. And then make sure that we have ongoing relationships with people who can be the ambassador or liaison.
Okay, group 1, thank you for great discussion. Cameras off. Group 2, it's your moment. Cameras on, group 2. All right. Feel free to pick up conversation where they left off or start somewhere new.
Well, I'll start kind of along the same lines of an area that our city is really, I'm in Bellevue, Washington, an area that we're really putting some emphasis in is in multifamily housing units, because we're seen as a single family neighborhoods city, but we're really transitioning to where right now 51% of our households are in multifamily housing. And it really does get down to boots on the ground and visiting multifamily complexes and getting to know property managers that can help you distribute information about programs and hopefully get more feedback from our multifamily housing, that's condos and apartments and our affordable housing units. And so we're really focusing on multifamily outreach at this time as our city is growing.
I wanted to touch on the storytelling in engagement. And this is a really interesting topic to me because the two sometimes don't seem to go hand in hand, but really when you think about it, they do. And I think kind of taking the time to listen and dive into a person's story that you're engaging with really leads to like authentic engagement and leads to ultimately that relationship building. And it's more than just, you know, what can I do to fix your problem and then on to the next one. And so that relationship building I've found pays dividends far into the future.
And to that point, Katie, I think I'd like to ask, you know, slightly moving into question 2, how would you define relational engagement? What does that really mean to you? And I think storytelling is probably part of that, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's more than just, you know, you have a stakeholder or resident call in that says like, you know, I got this problem, I've been dealing with it. Well, kind of nurturing an authentic relationship with them out, you know, helping them, but then also, you know, nurturing a continued relationship with them. Because then you kind of, it almost seems like you're bringing those folks to the table and making them kind of allies for a longer period of time.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. I've worked a lot with our outlying community council members who are out in the rural districts and often hear news later than the urban core that we have. We have a really unique county where we have a really strong, big urban core, and then we have our rural residents. And I think just being kind of a point of contact and a resource for those people and helping them work through a situation and really listening and taking the time to engage with them and understand their perspective and where they're coming from. And not just the one time, but to continue to follow up and build that relationship and check back in with them in a month or so to make sure that whatever issue they had, that everything is still going well, and know that if they email you, be quick to respond and be quick to listen and just make it obvious that you care about them and that you want to continue the relationship and see it grow rather than just a one-time, once and done, to the next person.
All right, thank you, group 2. Group 3, it's your time to shine. You know what to do. Come on camera, and I'll leave it to you.
Well, I absolutely love opportunities to do storytelling in my job. I think we probably all do. It seems like they're fewer and far between though than they ever have been, just because of all the other demands and things that have come along in the last couple of years. You know, that having that opportunity to humanize whatever service we're providing is just goes much further than some, you know, more contrived efforts at engagement I've found. I'd be curious to know your thoughts in our group about, you know, about those opportunities that we have that we need to prioritize taking advantage of.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying, Patrick, and it's finding folks that can activate the message, because sometimes we don't hold the key to understand the message, but there's somebody else in our organization that can do it. And I think our success in terms of engaging with underrepresented communities is engaging internally as well and working on not just recruitment, but retention of employees that come from these underrepresented backgrounds that know their community better than anybody else, but then they also have that city know-how and can help us navigate those two different worlds.
Yeah, Rocio, I think you're describing that concept in question 2 with relational, what does it say? Oh yeah, relational engagement, just sort of activating the message and finding those people and making those connections. But then, the point that you made, which is so important, is keeping them engaged, keeping them at the table and checking in with them regularly so that they feel like they're moving along with whatever the effort is.
Absolutely.
And I think,
I was going to say, sorry,
no, go for it, Brandon, go
I
for
was
it.
going to kind of agree with that, both question in 1 and 2. It's engaging some of the folks that are in the underrepresented groups that know where to go to meet the other folks where they are, to go out and find them, and then just keeping that relationship going and following up, listening and being active listening goes a long ways with those groups that don't feel like they're represented already. So
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Brandon. It's not a one and done. You have to build that relationship, and that also helps build trust. Because oftentimes, if we're working for a municipality, like some of us, or you're working for a group, you need to build that trust, because there are reasons that you don't have trust right now. So showing up again and again, that really helps the relationship.
Okay,
Yeah, and-
everyone.
Oh.
I'm going to cut you off, Patrick. I'm sorry. Everyone, if you want to come on camera or change your video settings so that you can see everyone, you just have to go back and uncheck the box now so you can see us all. I know we only have a couple minutes left, but if you hadn't done that before, did you like it? Thumbs up, thumbs down, in the middle. I think it's a cool one. It's doable in person. You can imagine it's doable virtually, which is what we always love. But as I wrap up here, I'm going to share my screen again, because if you want to talk to Danny or I more about the cool stuff that we talked about here, if you want to get connected with other people in the network, reach out to us, reach out to Elizabeth. I know Danny will drop our information in the chat box as well, but if you need it right in front of you for the next 10 seconds are our emails and our beautiful faces. And then I will turn it back over to Elizabeth in case she wants to send us out in the next couple of minutes with any final information, but please reach out to us. I don't know, Danny, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for participating and to keep digging into these 3 questions. These are things that Melody and I they're questions that are top of mind for us and that we love hearing other people's thoughts on. So keep bouncing those around in your own work, in your own organizations and relationships with other agencies. And thank you for joining us today.
So on behalf of IAP2 Intermountain and our officers as well, which we have quite a few on the call, first, thank you, Melody and Danny, for this great topic. This was so interactive. I know I learned a lot on different methods, and I think a lot of us others on the call did as well. If folks are interested, our next session is February 10th, and I'm excited. We're going to be learning about an IAP2 core value winner that came right from our area. We're going to be learning about the 300 West reconstruction project in Salt Lake City. So you can find out more about that, other events, and our chapter if you just visit iap2intermountain.org. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today, and I hope you have a great day.